The charcoal fire in the stove occasionally spat out tiny sparks, with soft crackling sounds, and wrapped in a thick blanket, I sank deep into the sofa, holding an e-reader in my left hand as I flipped pages while my right hand idly stroked a kitten with suction cup pads on its paws. When I first picked him up, he had been as skinny as a stick. But now, he could sprawl on his back and let anyone rub his belly. Welcome to Panda's Storyboard. Put on your headphones, get cozy, and settle in. Let's enjoy this story together. If you like it, don't forget to subscribe and give the video a like. Now, let's begin. Outside the window, goose feather-sized snowflakes were carried on a biting wind, and heaven and earth had long since turned pure white, with distant mountains and nearby trees swallowed by the heavy snowfall, until only blurred outlines remained, as if the entire world had been muted by this cold revelry. Babies, a good-sounding post-apocalyptic novel is ready. Please connect to Wi-Fi, tuck yourselves under the blanket, and here we go. 3 months ago, I was still in an office building, rushing proposals in front of a computer. Yet every night I kept having the same nightmare, a dream without heating or hot water, where I wrapped myself in layers of tattered quilts and still felt the cold stabbing into my bones like needles, my stomach growling with hunger, my vision darkening in waves, until I no longer had the strength to even lift my hand, and could only watch my body slowly stiffen and turn into an undiscovered human sculpture in an ice cellar. At first, I thought it was just stress, until the weather in reality began to turn strange, with snow and torrential rain in June and temperatures swinging wildly for months, as the scenes from my dreams gradually played out in the real world, until the sudden appearance of a storage space finally forced me to accept one fact: the apocalypse was really coming. I did not hesitate for a second, and rushed to the company the next morning to submit my resignation, my supervisor staring at the application form in my hand and frowning, as he asked whether I had found a better opportunity, and I only vaguely replied that there was an urgent family matter to deal with. Fortunately, I still had 12 days of unused annual leave, which converted to more than $8,600 in wages. And together with last month's project bonus and base salary, I received a total of $42,632. I went through all my bank cards and payment apps and found $200,000 in fixed deposits and $17,845 combined in mobile paying app balance, adding up to $260,477 in total, a sum that would be a fantasy to rely on to survive an unknown apocalypse. So I clenched my teeth and called a real estate agent, knowing that the old apartment my parents had left me had to be sold. When the agent heard I needed an urgent sale, he repeatedly confirmed whether I truly meant selling at 20% below market price, warning that it would mean losing more than $100,000. And I stared at the snowflakes drifting down outside the window again, and replied firmly that as long as I could get full payment within a month, the price was still negotiable. Perhaps luck was on my side, because on the third day after listing the apartment, a young couple came to view it, wanting to buy a place for their parents to retire in, and they were very satisfied with the location and layout, signing the contract without much hesitation. On the day I received the $1.36 million payment, I stood outside the bank, gripping my card so tightly that my fingertips trembled. Because this was not ordinary money, but the confidence that would keep me alive in the apocalypse. While waiting for the funds to clear, I did not idle, recalling that during a wilderness hike last year, the guide had mentioned a natural cave in the barren hills on the outskirts of the city, which I had found novel at the time, and deliberately memorized the location. So I drove my second-hand white sedan for 2 hours to find that mountain. Then climbed a steep slope for more than half an hour, before spotting the cave entrance behind rocks halfway up the mountainside. The entrance was only half a person high, pitch black inside and seemingly bottomless, with the damp scent of soil drifting out. And using the excuse of shooting a wilderness survival short video, I hired a renovation team from out of town, whose leader, Mr. Richard, frowned at the cave during the first inspection, and said that rebuilding it would be difficult, since materials would have to be carried up by hand, and labor would not be cheap. To which I simply doubled the quote, and said money was not an issue, as long as it could be finished within half a month, with an extra $20,000 bonus. Mr. Richard did not disappoint, as the workers first used precise blasting to expand the entrance to just wide enough for one person to pass through, then poured reinforced concrete walls 50 centimeters thick, and he patted his chest and guaranteed that even a heavy truck crashing into it would not budge the wall. The door was a discarded remnant of a bank vault I had a friend source, weighing 3 tons, and on installation day, 4 workers and a crane were needed to lower it in, the deafening clang when it fell into place, making the ground tremble slightly, as if the outside world had been completely cut off in an instant. The living room window was fitted with 3 layers of bulletproof glass and hung with thick curtains matching the color of the mountain rock, making the cave entrance nearly impossible to detect without close inspection, while the rock layer above the entrance protruded outward just enough to shield it from rain and sun. I also had solar panels installed in cracks at the top, with all wiring buried in stone seams, so that even someone passing close by would only see ordinary rock. The solar panels were connected to underground battery packs, and Mr. Richard said the power would be enough to support lighting, defense systems, and even a washing machine and projector. While 5 meters inside a bend, I added a second door with triple locks on a steel grill, behind which a 2-meter-deep pit covered with a movable steel plate was dug, so that anyone forcing entry would likely fall into a spike-filled trap, or be blocked by the grill even if they did not fall. What surprised me most was a natural fissure in the deep rock wall of the cave that seeped mountain spring water year-round, and the workers installed a filtration system so that the water flowed out clear and sweet, and could be drunk directly. They also partitioned storage rooms, a bedroom, and a tool room, with the bedroom laid with triple moisture-proof mats and insulation, so that even in sub-zero temperatures, it would remain warm. Ventilation was a major challenge, but after 2 days of study, Mr. Richard connected ducts through natural fissures and added multi-layer filtration, hiding the outlet in bushes to ensure airflow without exposing the location. And at my insistence, the smoke exhaust was routed the same way, to avoid the fatal mistake I had seen on survival shows where smoke revealed camps. Defense did not stop inside the cave, as I strung sensor lines along the ridge so that hanging empty cans would sound if touched, scattered gravel on the paths leading to the cave so footsteps would be audible at night, and set up an observation point with a high-powered telescope on an open platform at the mountaintop for extra security. Half a month later, the cave was complete, and looking at the solid fortress before me, I finally felt reassured. Of the $1.36 million from selling the house, I spent $620,000, and with my previous savings, I still had $1,477,000 left, which I carefully planned since no one knew how long the apocalypse would last. What followed was a frenzy of stockpiling. As I drove my second-hand car daily through wholesale markets from dawn to dusk, starting with the grain and oil market, where the mixed scent of grain and grease felt stifling, yet strangely comforting. Because these were life-saving supplies, the grain vendor, Mr. Lin, enthusiastically recommended Southeast Asian rice, and I ordered 3,000 kilograms of it, along with 2,000 kilograms of long-grain rice and various flours, stunning him into asking whether I was opening a supermarket. I calmly replied that my family was large and I did some small business, and proceeded to buy 400 kilograms of non-GMO rapeseed, peanut, and corn oil packed into small containers, along with hundreds of kilograms of sugar, salt, spices, hot pot seasoning, garlic, soy sauce, oyster sauce, and aromatic herbs, enough to ensure that even in the apocalypse, food would not be tasteless, settling the bill at $87,000 and having everything delivered to a temporary warehouse near the cave. From there, I moved on to daily necessities, buying 50 cartons of toilet paper, wipes, sanitary products, toothbrushes, toothpaste, shampoo, detergent, disinfectant, soap, skincare basics, large drums of dish soap, towels, plastic wrap, and storage bags, spending $44,000 and leaving myself with $869,000. Medicines were the top priority, so I visited over a dozen pharmacies, buying small amounts each time to avoid suspicion, stocking cold medicine, antibiotics, gastrointestinal drugs, painkillers, bandages, disinfectants, vitamins, protein powder, and even rabies and tetanus vaccines, spending $128,023 and leaving $740,000. Next came tools and fuel, including tons of coal, batteries, power banks, diesel generators, solid alcohol, lighters, candles, thick clothing and bedding, ropes, toolkits, and air purifiers. After which I had $325,000 left, sold my car for $40,000, and rented a small truck to collect supplies from the countryside. The rural sky was still blue, and the air smelled of soil and crops. Yet beneath the calm, I sensed unease, because in my dreams, the apocalypse had begun with a sudden extreme cold. And as the truck bounced along muddy roads, I stopped by a village and saw an elderly man squatting on a ridge, smoking a long pipe. His bronze skin creased like ravines. And when I asked whether he sold vegetables, Mr. Adams slowly looked me over and said they were pesticide-free, but would not keep long. So I lied that I was buying for city restaurants and had him harvest everything he could, calling his wife and grandson to help, their hands deftly snapping eggplants and peppers from the green leaves. The fresh scent of damp earth mixed with the fragrance of vegetables drifted over, making my nose sting, because in the 10 years of my dreams I had never smelled anything so pure again, and back then, being able to find even half a piece of moldy bread felt like good fortune. The tomatoes were carefully stacked in plastic crates, the fully ripened fruit glowing with an alluring sheen, their skins splitting at the slightest touch as sweet and sour juice flowed out, while the cucumbers still carried tiny spines and crunched crisply with every bite, filled with fresh aroma. When, loading the truck, I gave Mr. Adams an extra $500, and as he counted the money, he broke into a wide grin that revealed a mouthful of yellowed teeth, the wrinkles on his face smoothing out as he said, "Girl, you're truly a good person. Next year I'll plant more cherry tomatoes. Come back and buy them then. I'll give you a cheaper price." My throat tightened, and I could only nod hard, because where would there be a next year? And after this heavy snowfall, I did not know how many people would still be alive. After leaving Mr. Adams' place, I went to Mrs. Miller's house, where she had a cellar stacked with last year's dried green beans, potatoes, sweet potatoes, dried radish, and pickled vegetables, all foods that stored well. As she weighed everything, Mrs. Miller complained that her son had insisted on going to the city to work, saying farming in the village had no future. Yet, his monthly earnings were not even enough to cover rent, and she sighed that she should have kept him home to farm instead. When she heard that I wanted to buy corn, her eyes lit up, as she said her 2 acres of corn had just ripened, the kernels plump and full, and she quoted prices, $1.30 per ear if husked, and $1.50 if left with the husk, adding that unhusked corn kept longer. I told her to husk half and leave half unhusked, taking 500 ears of unhusked corn, so they would store longer, and so I could boil corn anytime I wanted in the future. Mrs. Miller was overjoyed and quickly called neighbors to help with the harvest, even warmly packing me a basket of boiled corn for the road. The next stop was a greenhouse at the village entrance, contracted by a young man named Jacob in his 20s. Bespectacled and scholarly-looking, whose greenhouse had an automatic sprinkler system where water droplets refracted tiny rainbows in the sunlight, especially beautiful. Jacob proudly showed me his hydroponic lettuce, telling me that he could harvest a batch every week, lush and green, with upscale city supermarkets competing to buy it at $8 per kilogram. I could not bear to tell him about the apocalypse, and instead bought all his finished produce and seeds, including experimental new varieties, making him grin from ear to ear as he helped load lettuce, cucumbers, and tomatoes onto the truck. The truck bed was soon filled to the brim with dew-covered spinach, soil-streaked carrots, cauliflower wrapped in newspaper, and whole sacks of large pumpkins. I found a secluded spot, transferred all the vegetables into my space, and then drove on to the next village, this time increasing the scale of my purchases. I collected 600 eggs, all laid by villagers' own free-range chickens, their yolks deep yellow and far more fragrant than feed-raised eggs from the city. I bought 200 chickens and ducks, which the villagers helped process and cage for easier storage, and also purchased 20 nearly market-ready pigs, spending a great deal, but knowing meat was a necessity worth stockpiling. Later, I went to cattle and sheep farmers, buying 2 cows and 10 sheep for over $40,000, then found a fish pond and bought 800 kilograms of fish and shrimp for $10,000, as they provided protein and could be frozen in my space for use anytime. I spent a full week in the countryside, harvesting the most sweet potatoes and potatoes, with potatoes costing just over $1 per kilogram, and sweet potatoes only a few dollars per kilogram, cheap and long-lasting, collecting a total of 5,000 kilograms, enough to last me many years. Some elderly villagers made brooms and dustpans woven from bamboo, sturdy and durable, which I bought as well, 20 sets in total. And others skilled in carpentry made solid small stools and tables, of which I bought 10 sets to use in the cave. On the return trip at sunset, The village in the rearview mirror was gilded in gold, cooking smoke curling upward, dogs chasing each other along the ridges, and elderly people sitting under trees, fanning themselves, as they talked about tomorrow's weather and this year's harvest, unaware that such peaceful days were already numbered. This rural trip cost over $200,000, leaving me with $167,543. And as I looked at my bank balance, I sighed softly, realizing how quickly money vanished after only a few days. The next day, I went to the kitchenware market, buying 60 stainless steel basins in various sizes, 10 soup pots, 5 steamers, 5 rice cookers, 10 woks, 5 clay pots, 5 frying pans, 10 milk pots, determined to have backups for anything that might break. I bought 5 sets of kitchen knives for chopping vegetables, cutting bones, and slicing, 20 storage racks to keep everything orderly, 20 large plates, 50 small plates, 40 small bowls in 10 sets of 4, 20 large bowls in 5 sets of 4, and 20 vegetable washing baskets. I bought 50 ladles of various types, silicone and wooden cutting boards 10 each, 200 pairs of solid wood chopsticks in 20 sets, 20 bags of steel scrubbers, 40 packs of dishcloths, 100 pairs of reusable gloves, and 40 boxes of disposable gloves, knowing cleaning supplies were cheap but consumed quickly. I also bought 10 coal-burning stoves for heating and cooking in winter, 4 induction cookers for summer use, 20 mugs, 20 glass cups, 50 thermos bottles and flasks, 10 foot-soaking tubs for winter warmth and fatigue relief, 30 water buckets, 3 barbecue grills, 10 juicers, and 10 meat grinders, essentially buying every kitchen appliance I could think of to avoid lacking them later, spending $43,557 and leaving $123,983. Seeing it was still early, I took a taxi to the home textiles market and bought high-quality bedding quilts, sheet sets, and pillows, calculated for 70 years of use, all pure cotton, soft and comfortable, spending over $30,000 and dropping my balance below $100,000. With less than a month until the apocalypse, I knew this money was far from enough, so I gritted my teeth and unleashed my final trump card by taking out online loans. Those days I barely slept, my phone memo filled with every app that could lend money, and I applied to all of them, my hands terrifyingly steady as I filled in information, maxed out limits, uploaded ID photos, completed facial recognition, and even accepted shockingly high interest rates, watching $30,000, $50,000, $80,000 roll into my account until the numbers stopped rising. Adding the withdrawn medical insurance balance, housing fund, and the remaining $100,000 in hand, I reached exactly $1 million. And as I stared at the number in my banking app, I felt a tangle of emotions, knowing this money was both my survival capital for the apocalypse and a crushing debt. Yet I had no other choice, because staying alive mattered most. Alongside offline purchasing, I also shopped online relentlessly, my phone screen lighting up and going dark as tracking numbers filled page after page, parcels flooding into the temporary warehouse like a tide. With basic necessities covered, I began buying convenience foods, 100 bags of potato vermicelli, 200 tubs of instant soups, 500 packs of instant noodles in various flavors, 1,000 packs of dehydrated food, 400 bags of oatmeal and rice vermicelli, 20 cases of sausages, 200 self-heating hot pots, 100 self-heating rice meals, 100 each of braised chicken legs, duck legs, chicken feet and duck feet, 200 packs of pickled chicken feet, 500 packs of spicy strips, 500 bags of chips, and 10 large cases of candy, chocolate, and biscuits. These snacks, though not essential, would help relieve the monotony of apocalypse life. And I also bought 100 cases of bottled drinks, including cola, juice, and green tea, 20 cases of instant coffee and milk tea powder, 50 cases each of fruit cans, meat cans, and dried meat, all durable and easy to eat. Passing a popular cured meat shop with a long line, I joined in and bought 1,000 kilograms of sausages and cured pork, which stored well and could make noodles wonderfully fragrant. And all these dry foods cost $111,300, leaving me with $888,700. Each visit to a gas station only allowed refueling of a few dozen liters, and ID registration was required. So I neither had the time to make repeated trips nor wanted to draw suspicion, and instead asked a friend to help me find a fuel dealer, spending $200,000 to buy large quantities of gasoline and diesel, which were sealed in metal barrels and stored in the cave's tool room, far from any fire source, to ensure safety. I even thought to myself that if there were opportunities later, I might still be able to scavenge fuel from gas stations for free, since that's how post-apocalyptic novels always go. When order collapses, you can usually find supplies no one wants anymore. And spiritual satisfaction is important too, because without it, it's easy to sink into depression in the apocalypse. I went to the largest electronics market in the city and bought 20 high-capacity hard drives, each with 20 terabytes, and downloaded all kinds of materials, movies, TV series, music, and novels, keeping 2 copies of everything, one for use and one as backup, so that if one hard drive failed, there would still be another. I also bought more than 20 tablets and stored them in my space, so if any broke, there would be replacements, and they could be used daily to watch movies or read. I bought 10 electronic watches and 10 mechanical watches as well, because there might be power outages in the apocalypse, and once electronic watches ran out of battery, they would be useless, while mechanical watches were more reliable, requiring no batteries and working as long as they were wound. All of this cost over $60,000, leaving me with around $630,000. I also bought a lot of yarn in various colors, planning to knit things like scarves and hats when I had nothing to do, so I could pass the time while also keeping warm. The Lego sets I had been eyeing before were bought without hesitation too, because Lego trains hands-on ability and helps relieve stress. I also bought many books and comics that couldn't be downloaded online, including novels, essays, history books, and manga, spending over $10,000. At noon, I went to eat at a Thai restaurant, and the sour spicy tang of tom yum soup, the sweet fragrance of pineapple fried rice, and the rich flavor of curry crab made it impossible for me to put down my chopsticks, because once the apocalypse arrived, I would never be able to eat these foods again. That day, the weather was wonderful, with gentle breezes and bright sunshine, and the streets were crowded with people walking in small groups, smiles on their faces, some chatting, some taking photos, others buying ice cream for their children. As I watched them, I felt a twinge of sadness, wondering how much longer such peaceful and happy days could last. Passing by a milk tea shop I often visited, I was just about to go in, when I suddenly remembered that ordering delivery would be cheaper and could be sent straight home. Opening the delivery app and seeing the screen filled with milk tea, fried chicken, burgers, ice cream, and cakes, my nose stung, because in the future, I would never get to drink or eat these again. But then it occurred to me that I had a space, and that the items stored there could stay perfectly fresh forever. So why not buy more now and store them, so I could eat them whenever I wanted later? I rushed home, collapsed onto the sofa, and began ordering delivery like a madwoman, buying 10 cups of every flavor I liked from every milk tea brand, along with fried chicken, burgers, ice cream, cakes, crayfish, barbecue, hot pot, skewers, braised foods, and cold dishes, ordering everything I could think of and in large quantities. The delivery drivers came trip after trip, and a few of them even became familiar with me, joking with a smile. "Miss, is there something good happening today? Buying so much delicious food?" And I could only vaguely reply that there were many people at home, and everyone was eating together. The next day, to avoid raising suspicion, I booked a hotel, far from home, and continued ordering delivery to supplement foods that couldn't be delivered near my place, such as a famous roast duck that required lining up, buns that were hard to get, and imported chocolate. I only stopped when the balance in my bank card dropped to $150,000, and looking at the space piled high with takeaway food, I finally felt more at ease, knowing that even in the apocalypse, I could still eat what I wanted, instead of going hungry like in my dreams. On the third day, I went to the fruit wholesale market, because fruit could supplement vitamins and boost immunity, and had to be stocked in large quantities. I bought 100 boxes of bananas, 100 boxes of apples, 100 boxes golden kiwis, 30 boxes of cherries, 40 boxes of grapes, 40 boxes of mandarins, 100 pitayas, 200 watermelons, 100 pomelos, and 20 boxes of pomegranates. All fruits I loved, and most of which could be stored for a long time, and even those that couldn't could be kept fresh in my space. With less than half a month left before the apocalypse, and only a little over $100,000 remaining, I went to the seaside, partly to see the scenery one last time, and partly to stock up on seafood. The sea was vast, the water a deep blue, waves crashing against the shore with a rushing sound, and sitting on the sand with the sea breeze brushing my face, eased some of the anxiety in my heart. I checked in at various scenic spots, took many photos, and bought some souvenirs as a way of leaving memories for this world, because I might never see such scenery again. After checking travel guides online in advance, I went to the pier early the next morning, where freshly caught seafood was still lively, shrimp jumping in baskets, crabs waving their big claws, and ribbon fish gleaming silver, all looking incredibly fresh. I negotiated prices with a fisherman and bought at wholesale rates: 100 kilogram of mantis shrimp, 100 kilogram of large shrimp, 100 kilogram of swimming crabs, 60 kilogram of scallops, 100 kilogram of sea snails, 100 kilogram of oysters, 100 kilogram of clams, 80 kilogram of ribbon fish, and 200 kilogram of salmon, as well as indulging myself by buying several king crabs and Boston lobsters that I normally wouldn't bear to eat, deciding that in the apocalypse I should treat myself well. The seaside trip cost over $60,000, leaving less than $40,000 on my card. I sold unused shoes, bags, and gold jewelry I had previously bought on impulse online, because these things would be useless in the apocalypse and were better exchanged for money to buy supplies, earning over $20,000 and bringing my cash back up to more than $60,000. I bought several drones and a few high-powered binoculars on installment, planning to use the drones to scout the outside situation for danger and the binoculars to observe distant movements, such as whether anyone was approaching the cave or whether animals were nearby. Since firearms were impossible to obtain, I bought several slingshots and crossbows, along with sharp daggers, as slingshots could knock small animals unconscious, and daggers could be used for self-defense or cutting. I bought 2 cases of pepper spray so I could protect myself in dangerous situations. Finally, I bought mattresses, sofas, cushions, and carpets, organizing both the cave and my space neatly, categorizing supplies, placing food staples in the deepest area where they were less likely to get damp, daily necessities where they were easy to access, and medicines on dry, cool shelves with labels for easy retrieval. Looking at everything before me, I felt at ease and knew I could move in. During that time, the weather became increasingly abnormal, with many cities experiencing heavy snowfall even though it was summer. And in less than a day, the entire world turned white as temperatures plummeted to more than 10 degrees below zero. Apocalypse-related topics began appearing online, but everyone treated them as jokes, with some people filming videos joking that they could finally ski in summer. Others showing off a few packs of instant noodles at home, saying they were ready for the end of the world. And still others joking in comment sections about going to eat at someone else's house. Only I knew that the apocalypse was truly about to arrive. On the evening before moving into the cave, I walked along the streets to take one last look at the familiar city, when a dark shadow suddenly rushed toward me, startling me so badly that I stumbled backward and nearly fell, until I heard a small meow and realized it was a little tabby kitten. Its fur was soaked and dusty, its eyes crusted with discharge, its body so thin it was nothing but skin and bones, looking only a little over a month old and wobbling as it walked. I squatted down, and it timidly rubbed against my hand, its eyes full of dependence, and seeing its watery gaze instantly softened my heart. So I picked it up, wrapped it in my jacket, and took it to a pet hospital. The vet said it was over 2 months old and only looked so small due to malnutrition. But aside from that, everything else was normal, and after deworming, I took it home and named it Snowball. With just over $10,000 left on my card, I bought 500 kilogram of cat food for over $7,000, along with some canned food and bowls to supplement Snowball's nutrition. Hearing that kittens shed easily, I also bought grooming brushes and lint rollers, and spent the remaining money on commonly used cat medicines such as cold medicine and gastrointestinal medicine, so that Snowball could be treated promptly if it got sick. I planned to make the cat tree and toys myself, using leftover wood and rope, and to substitute cat litter with soil and sand, because funds were limited and I had to save where I could. On the day before the apocalypse arrived, I checked all equipment, confirming that solar power was stable, the generator's diesel tank was full, the water levels in the storage tanks and gas cylinders were sufficient. The underground water in the cave remained clear and sweet. The monitoring footage at the entrance was sharp. The surroundings were quiet with no abnormalities. The sensor lines and trip mechanisms were intact, and the defense systems were functioning normally. I walked to the observation point and set up the high-powered binoculars, watching the city below spread out under the setting sun. Traffic flowing, neon lights beginning to glow, and the distant noise turning into a vague hum like a piece of music about to end. Fine snowflakes began drifting down from the sky, and pedestrians hurried along the streets with hunched shoulders, wrapping themselves tightly in wrinkled clothes, just pulled from wardrobes, impatience written across their faces, still unaware that this was only the beginning of the apocalypse. The next morning, everything outside was already a vast expanse of white, with mountain vegetation buried under heavy snow, making the cave even more concealed so that from a distance it was impossible to tell there was an entrance at all. I decided to treat myself, setting up a small grill, lighting smokeless charcoal, taking out a thick-cut tomahawk steak, seasoning it simply with sea salt and black pepper, before placing it on the grate, where fat dripped down with a sizzling sound and rich meaty aromas instantly filled the entire cave. Snowball smelled the fragrance, jumped down from the sofa, and circled the grill while meowing from time to time, unbearably cute. I took out an extra-large cup of pearl milk tea, warm and comforting in my hands, and with one sip, the chewy pearls and rich sweetness flooded my mouth, satisfaction surging instantly. The grilled steak was crisp and fragrant on the outside, and juicy inside, and when I cut into it, pink juices flowed out, and with one bite, the meaty richness mixed with black pepper's pungency exploded in my mouth, the satisfaction coursing through my body like an electric current. I also poured myself a full cup of passionfruit drink, whose fruity aroma and tannins perfectly cut through the richness, making it refreshing and cleansing to the palate. Walking to the observation opening and looking through the binoculars, I saw the city's outline blurred, with faint gray smoke rising in some places, likely from people lighting fires to keep warm, while the outdoor temperature had already dropped to over 20 degrees below zero. Online, people were saying their homes had lost running water because pipes were frozen or burst, forcing them to melt snow for water, and others said their food supplies were running out, and, when they went to supermarkets, they found them already looted, shelves completely bare. The residual warmth of the grill lingered as the meat aroma drifted out through the ventilation and quickly dissipated in the cold air, and I sighed, sprinkling some cumin powder over the remaining steak, whose fragrance grew even richer as it was released by the heat. I cut off a second piece of steak and ate slowly, feeling a sense of emptiness in my heart, wondering how many people could still be like me, calmly eating steak and drinking milk tea in the apocalypse. In the afternoon, I opened a thick notebook and began taking inventory of supplies. For staple foods, there were 5,000 kilograms of rice, 2,000 kilograms of flour, 500 kilograms of various coarse grains and beans, and 1,200 kilograms of cooking oil, all sealed in vacuum bags and stacked like city walls at the deepest part of the storage room to prevent dampness. For meats, including steaks, chicken wings, pork chops, fish and shrimp, chicken, duck, beef, and lamb, I entered my space and saw everything neatly categorized in freezers, with labels for easy retrieval. The generator still had 30 large barrels of diesel, each holding 200 liters, enough to last a very long time. And there were backup solar panels as well, so even if a few failed, it wouldn't affect overall power supply. There were 5,000 barrels of drinking water, and 100 boxes of large bottled spring water, enough for me to drink for a lifetime. Daily necessities were piled in the corner, giving off a faint clean scent, and covering every category, so I didn't have to worry about running out. Medicines were placed on dry, cool shelves, and I checked them one by one with particular care, because these were life-saving items and couldn't afford the slightest mistake. On the tool rack were axes, entrenching shovels, fire axes, multifunction tools, ropes, pulleys, toolboxes, water purifiers, spare batteries, drones, and power banks. Cold and hard objects that nevertheless gave me immense reassurance, letting me know that even if danger came, I had the ability to protect myself. By the time I finished checking supplies, it was already late at night, and the cave was quiet, except for Snowball's purring, my own breathing, and the low hum of the freezer compressor. I felt a little hungry, not for survival but for comfort, and walking to the spirit stone wall and looking at the dazzling array of spirit stones, I hesitated for a moment before choosing a pack of instant noodles, a bag of jerky, and a bottle of iced cola. Instant noodles were my favorite, and even in the apocalypse, I couldn't do without them. Snowball wrinkled and sneezed, ran from the kitchen to the other end of the sofa, curled into a ball, and ignored me. The noodles were served in a large bowl, red chili oil bubbling with heat and toppings piled generously, and I sat cross-legged on a folding chair, slurping the noodles as the sour and spicy heat burned my mouth and sweat quickly beaded on my temples, biting into the beef jerky. The beef jerky was chewy and richly seasoned, and after taking a gulp of icy cola, the alternation of cold and heat sent a sharp tingling through my scalp, flooding me with happiness. After finishing the late-night meal, I went back to the observation port, and through the night vision mode of the binoculars, the city appeared as layers of white in varying shades. Dead silent, with only scattered lights still on, like stars in the darkness. The wind had grown stronger, rushing past the cave entrance and letting out a low muffled howl, like the roar of some beast. After checking the filtration units of the ventilation system and making sure airflow was normal, I crawled into the bed laid with soft blankets, pulled the down quilt over myself, and closed my eyes, my ears filled with the hum of the freezer compressor and the sound of my own heartbeat. The smell of instant noodles still lingered in my nose, mixed with the dry, dusty scent unique to the cave, and whatever was happening in the outside world seemed for the moment to have nothing to do with me. Before sleep took me, my final thought was whether to have seafood congee with pan-fried dumplings for breakfast tomorrow, or to use the small oven to bake an apple pie. The next day, the smart sensor lights inside the cave slowly brightened to simulate daylight, soft white light illuminating the entire cavern, and I woke to the aroma of food. Snowball was already awake, lying beside my pillow and rubbing his head against my cheek, his meows soft and sticky. The fresh sweetness of seafood congee and the oily fragrance of pan-fried dumplings circled briefly in my mind, but in the end, they were defeated by the sweet aroma of apple pie. I rolled over and sat up, stepped onto the soft carpet, and walked straight to the baking area, where high-gluten flour, butter, sugar, whipping cream, yeast, and box after box of glossy red apples were neatly stacked in breathable produce baskets, each wrapped in protective netting. I washed the apples, peeled them, and cut them into small pieces, lightly marinating them with sugar and cinnamon, and the apple's sweet fragrance soon spread through the air. Flour, butter, and powdered sugar were mixed together and rubbed into crumbs with my fingertips, then chilled in the refrigerator, while another portion of flour was kneaded into pie dough and left to rest for half an hour. Though the process was tedious, time had lost its urgency here, so I could work slowly and enjoy it, every movement unhurried and focused. The clinking of the mixing bowl, the soft rasp of the rolling pin over dough, and the gentle bubbling of apples stewing in the pot blended together into something deeply soothing. Snowball followed my movements, constantly bobbing his head and occasionally pawing at my pant leg to get me to play with him. The orange glow emitted as the small oven preheated was warm to the point of luxury. After putting the pie into the oven, I ground a pot of hand-brewed coffee while waiting, the roasted aroma of the beans mingling seamlessly with the sweetness of the apples. With a ding, the oven timer sounded, and wearing oven mitts, I carefully took out the golden, flaky apple pie, steam rising as the sweet fragrance instantly filled the cave. I cut off a corner, the crust cracking apart to reveal the dark, soft apple filling inside, sugar syrup gently bubbling, and after blowing on it, I took a bite, crisp, hot, and sweet, the warm scent of cinnamon filling my mouth and leaving me brimming with happiness. Another sip of black coffee followed, its bitterness perfectly balancing the richness of the pie. Flawless. I spent nearly 2 hours on breakfast alone, slowly savoring the comfort, and afterward washed the dishes at an unhurried pace, wiped down the oven, sealed the remaining pie in a food bag, and refrigerated it to save as an afternoon snack. In the afternoon, I carried out my usual observation, the binoculars slowly sweeping over the dead city, where the outdoor temperature had already dropped to -50°C. Only 2 figures appeared outside, bundled up tightly like rice dumplings, moving quickly as if searching for something, before vanishing from sight. My gaze fell on the fully charged drone and its matching VR goggles, and a sudden thought surfaced in my mind, to go take a look at the outside situation. Previously, I had only flown it twice to practice control, and had never truly scouted the city, and my heart began to beat a little faster, a mix of anticipation and nervousness. The heavy steel door at the cave entrance was opened only enough to allow the drone to slip through, and I guided it toward the edge of the city below. Through the images transmitted to the VR goggles, the cityscape came into sharp focus. Several construction vehicles lay scattered on the streets, their windows shattered, and bodies buried under thick snow, while workers in heavy cold weather gear moved slowly, some clearing snow and others repairing lines, all looking exhausted. Shop windows were empty, glass broken, the goods inside looted clean, with packaging and trash strewn across the ground. The wind lifted scraps of paper and plastic bags, spinning them through the empty streets, and making the scene feel especially desolate. The faint hum of the drone's motors came through the equipment, unusually clear in the silent cave. The camera slowly panned across a residential building's balconies, most of them empty or piled with clutter and covered in snow, until one balcony suddenly caught my attention. In several foam boxes, things were being grown, a few leafy vegetables drooping with yellowing leaves and looking malnourished, with two spindly plants beside them bearing a few shriveled red fruits that stood out starkly against the snow. Next to the boxes was a crude drip irrigation setup made from plastic bottles, a thin tube connected to a water bottle slowly dripping moisture into the soil. There was no one on the balcony, the curtains drawn thick so the interior could not be seen, and I guessed that someone inside was struggling to survive, just like me. The drone hovered for a moment, and only those few stubborn half-dead plants trembled gently in the cold wind, as if quietly telling the story of how hard survival was. I skillfully guided the drone back into the cave and quickly shut the steel door, locking it in place. The cave's constant temperature air wrapped around me, carrying the familiar sense of food and supplies, and my taut nerves finally relaxed. I removed the VR goggles and set them and the drone controller on the table, making a soft clatter. Although the outside world was cruel, seeing those few plants still stirred a trace of hope in my heart, because even in the apocalypse, there were people striving to live and searching for a way forward. I took out some seafood, shrimp, scallops, and clams, along with a piece of beef and some tripe, washed a head of lettuce, made a fruit platter and a vegetarian platter, and finally brought out a portion of crayfish and braised dishes, pairing everything with a huge cup of Da Wang tea. In a good mood, I decided to celebrate with hot pot. Tearing open the hot pot base packet released a rich, numbing spicy beef tallow aroma, and after adding an appropriate amount of hot water to the pot, I waited for it to boil, unable to stop myself from sniffing appreciatively. Truly fragrant. Once the water boiled, I added the beef and tripe first, which only needed a brief swish before eating, and lifting a slice of beef, I dipped it in the rolling red oil, coated it in sauce, and sent it into my mouth. The meat was tender, spicy, and scalding hot, instantly driving away all the chill, and the ripples in my heart stirred by what I had seen outside seemed to be swallowed along with this steaming hot pot and digested away. After lunch, I felt drowsy, played with Snowball for a while until even the teaser wand could no longer hold his attention, mixed some cat food and canned food for him, and only after watching him eat with gusto did I crawl into bed and quickly fall asleep. Life in the cave was calm and fulfilling, with my days spent eating and sleeping on schedule, observing the outside world, tending vegetables, and playing with Snowball, occasionally watching movies, reading, or doing handicrafts. With food at home, there was no panic in my heart, and though such days were simple, they felt solid and real, standing in stark contrast to the extreme frozen apocalypse outside the cave. Some people said I was selfish and should not think only of myself but help others, yet I knew I was not a savior, just an ordinary person. And being able to survive in the apocalypse was already no easy thing. All I could do was take good care of myself and Snowball, and in this icy end of days, guard my own small piece of ground, because surviving was the best answer I could give to myself.